Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rom, broadcasting to you from the Xtreme Studios in the Xtreme Palace, just Pine Hills Palace. Oh my gosh, Professor Pixel. I thought I was in a secret underground lair because tonight we're continuing our James Bond review. And yes, I am just west of Orlando, Florida, and you're south of Orlando, Florida. Gosh dang it. I don't know what to say or do here because it's Roger Moore, and we're going to review just his movies in general and rank from worst to best. So, wow, I just totally flubbed that, and I feel great. I almost feel like Max Zorn getting tossed out of a blimp. I don't know what to say, but
Ah, ah, oh no, like that.
yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, so what we're doing here on the Extreme Movie Show is for the alpha programming, reprogramming, however you want to call it, of the young 20 something Professor Bixel here from Central Florida. We are going to see all the James Bond movies in order. We've just finished up with a recent live recording of A View to a Kill with Roger Moore. So we said, before we jump into the two Timothy Dalton ones, we'll stop and we'll take a look at the films. I believe it's 7 of them that Roger Moore did. And we're going to go from worst to first in our own particular thing. So, Bixel, we'll go here in a moment when we get going. So we'll have you do like your worst one, and then I'll do my worst one, and we'll go through it. So, before we dive into those particular numbers and all that, do you want to just talk a little bit about now that you've seen Sean Connery and Roger Moore, even though we've seen On Her Majesty's Secret Service, we'll leave that off to the side. Let's just compare a little bit of Connery versus Moore and what you thought now that you've seen the entire catalog of both.
Um, well, since we started this journey, it's been really good to go ahead and see to finally sit down and see all of more really, because even before I knew I had seen like one of the Connery ones, and I was fairly certain about one other, but I really hadn't seen any of Moore. Like he wasn't my stockpile of knowledge at all. All I knew is that he had quite a few, and we hadn't touched them. I really have, since we got to switch to Moore, really come to respect his Bond, in a way that obviously we love Sean Connery. We really do. But there's something just a little more refined, I feel,
Mm-hmm.
with Moore. I'm I'm glad they cut out some of the romantic options, even though it feels like there's a little more romance in his movies. But it
But Roger
cuts.
Moore was slaying it, just like Connery. But yeah, I think the approach of it looks different, doesn't it?
Yeah, because basically what Connery did, he would go around and he would screw around with multiple Bond girls multiple times in the same movie.
Oh yeah.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But it helped, especially with some of the films here, to go ahead and just focus. Just have the one interest. And I really do enjoy Roger Moore as Bond. It's kind of sad that we're saying goodbye now, even though we said goodbye years ago.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously since the early 60s going here to the mid 80s an entire generation literally of time that's gone by where we've seen the evolution of the female character in Bond films going from, Holly Goodhead and, Pussy Galore to, Mayday. I mean, you can tell what's going to be happening, and I think this trend obviously continues to the rest of the Bond films. Starts off as a Playboy fantasy and starts turning into other stuff that we'll talk about as we get through the Craig and Brosnan eras here too. But there's 7 films for Roger Moore. Again, my order is I'm not saying these are the best films or my favorites. It's kind of like a combination. If I had to take one of the 7 and get rid of it and leave the other 6, that's how I'm approaching this. So I'll go ahead and start first, and then I'll go over to you for your worst film of the entire Moore Bond franchise. For me, out of the 7 films, I think the one that's the worst is the one that we actually just got done reviewing, The View to a Kill. It has nothing to do with his age or his performance. I think his performance is very consistent through the franchise. I just think for me, outside of the opening Gambit, especially when they're in Paris, and some incredible visuals, and has some good action. It just kind of falters in the second and third act, which is my traditional beef against the Bond film. So I just think a lot of the badness comes from Christopher Walken as the bad guy, because he's in no way intimidating, threatening, and just seems kind of silly and goofy, even by Moonraker standards. It's just, it's the worst of the Bonds. I know we kind of had some decent praise for it, and we all like it at different levels. But for me, if I had to eliminate one of the 7 Bond films from the Moore catalog, it's A View to a Kill in my worst position. What about you?
Moonraker. I've been thinking about this for a little while now. I was like, was Moonraker really did it sit with me that long that I was so unhappy with it?
Really? Or as I should say, Roger Moore would say, listen carefully. Really?
Really? I mean, there's just a level of absurdity there that makes it really hard to get through. Like, I did my best to go ahead and have fun with it, but when you're trying to have fun with it, it's basically treating it like a good bad movie, and I don't appreciate doing that to a film that should be decent, especially with a man like Moore, who he's doing his best. But when you're dealing with Jaws and Dolly and wanting to refine the human species in space, it's too much. It's too much. It's
Wow.
too much absurdity in a Bond movie. And there's no other. I think it's actually the one film that doesn't have Q with a ridiculous amount of gadgets from that point, and it's still too much. I can't. I'm sorry.
Well, I can understand that's a lot of people's take on it. A lot of people think of the absurdity of it's what changed them. The tempo is such a stark contrast between this and the next film that would come out, the Bond one, that'd be For Your Eyes Only. Well, obviously we're talking about all of the rest of them here. Man, it is absurd. I can't deny that. I will say though, it's interesting because you have somebody that's worked, like I say, on the second directing unit or action unit, whatever, and then eventually there's a group of people that get to direct a couple of these films at a time. And so in this particular case here, when we're talking about Moonraker as your worst of the entire franchise for the Moors, it's like I can't argue it. I mean, but this guy has some goofy stuff in it, Louis Gilliver, but the look of the film to me is tremendous. We'll talk more about Moonraker shortly. All right, out of the 6 remaining ones for me, the 6th worst, or is it second worst? I guess I'm thinking about this too hard. My next to last favorite of the Moore catalog is his debut, Live and Let Die. I absolutely love Jane Seymour as the Bond girl in here. I like how a part of it's in New York at the beginning. I don't mind the occult angle and the voodoo. As a kid, that was kind of cool. It's just very dated when you go back and look at it, which isn't necessarily horrible. And I actually kind of like Mr. Big and the whole thing, but it feels kind of weak. It doesn't feel like it's an international spy thriller because they're down there and doing stuff. And again, original Bond wasn't really like that. So it's enjoyable. I can watch it, but there's something, the viewing experience of it, even though I can enjoy big chunks of it, it's just kind of a rough watch. And compared to some of the other strengths that other movies have, that's what makes it fall down to my list. What about you for number 6?
It's the same one. We got
Yeah?
the same one because of I have one big reason, and when we talked about this movie, I told you then and there that it was was J.W. Pepper and that freaking boat chase. I did not like it. I
know.
hated it. You know how I was feeling about boat chases at that point in this franchise. I was so sick of it. And then to add the insult to injury, Sheriff J.W. Pepper comes in, and it's just too much. It's too much. I liked starting out with the because this is the one that starts out with a
Voodoo.
Voodoo, the whole like festival for a funeral. They get the guy in the coffin, right? That's
New
this one.
Orleans, yeah,
That's fun,
it's great. And it's
but
and using a local thing. It feels good when you're watching. You're like, yeah, this is cool. This is good Bond stuff.
but then it just falls apart. Like once you get to the end, I don't care about King of Manga. Don't care. It's too much. It's
Yamakoto, I think, does a good job as the bad guy. The way he talks and his presence, charisma. The guy blowing up at the end and them escaping is just it's wow. I mean, but again, that's the third acts are always kind of bad. But yeah. All right. Moving on to the fifth worst film in the Bond franchise. The third, whatever. Number 5. I've already eliminated for myself View to a Kill and Live and Let Die. I think the next worst one for me, even though this one's fun and it's cute, it's just extremely thin. It's like a nice, tall, cool glass of lemonade, and then it passes right through you. It's Octopussy.
okay.
I love absolutely the whole look of it with India and the eating and the whole getting off the boat and the coming in and the blade. And I think it's the second film actually that Maud Adams plays a Bond girl. She of course is playing the head of the Octopussy tribe. I think Moore does a great job in it too, but it's just thin. It's like you're on a diet. You're trying to eat lean for the day. I guess there's no carbs to it. It's just very clean cut Bond, and that's what it is. I'm not offended by the elephant chase and the swinging like Tarzan. That doesn't bug me at all. I love the opening bit with, oh, your name's El Toro. Well, that's a little bull. I mean, everything Roger Moore does is so easy and so damn good and memorable, but it really is kind of a thin film. I don't even remember the third act. It's so boring.
Okay. I mean, okay.
Obviously, you may feel differently. That's okay. So you got a moment to review before you
I
put yours in.
think I do. I think I do. Um, and it's really hard to pick this one because I'm between two, but I think it's actually going to be The Man with the Golden Gun. And it's hard for me to say that because it's like tied right there with another film. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's this one because again, Sergeant J.W. Pepper is there on frickin' holiday. Um, but it's still a really good, it's still a really solid film. I mean, you have Christopher Lee as the bad guy, the third nipple. Uh, that's pretty awesome. But it's just the Man with Golden Gun just doesn't do it for me like some of the other films. Even with Lee getting some action and then killing the girl that Pop was interested in, still not enough.
Well, it's very easy if we were to go back and say, hey, let's just review the Roger Moore opening sequences, the gambits, right? The gun barrel scenes, the women, the toys, the gadgets, the cars, the locations, and just do gazillions of videos on it. And I'm sure we'll do that at some point. We could even talk about the opening songs because, like in my seventh spot, the worst one, "View to a Kill," I'm indifferent about it. It's a Bond song by 80 standards, not a problem. Then you look at like my number 6 one, "Live and Let Die." It's a tremendously energetic song. It's phenomenal. Was it Nobody Does It Better? I think it's Octopussy. Okay, that's fine.
No,
But
that's the guy who loves me.
you're right. You're right. My mistake. My mistake.
No.
But it's funny you bring up Man with the Golden Gun because for me that's my number 4 film as far as being worst in the Moore franchise for me for a lot of the same reasons you said too. Sergeant Pepper, I could take him or leave him. I think that Sergeant Pepper, Jesus Christ, Sheriff Pepper. I really like the Asian location of this and seeing the background and all that stuff. That's really, really cool. And god damn it, just the whole island scene. That this is a Bond. God, we haven't even talked about the evil Bond layers and ranking those, right? I mean, that's another one. But this one, I always keep coming back to, man, this just looks so friggin' good when they're on their beach and you got Scaramanga. I like the ragtop piano type bit of, the Man with the Golden Gun theme being played on it. I like how he's shooting around. I like how he brings people in to practice. He's wearing a tracksuit. I mean, everything about Christopher Lee is so good in here. He's one of the best Bond villains to me, really an equal. I could care less about the Solix Agitator. Part of what makes it bad, though, is was it Miss Goodnight? I mean, just they write these ladies so bad sometimes. It really is a drag on it. And there's some good background music and stuff. It's just it's a hot and cold movie. It's kind of frustrating. You know, it's like that girlfriend that will or won't, and you're just like, all right, I'm done with you. And that's why it's number 4 for me.
Okay. My number 4 is actually going to be. I think it's going to be The Spy Who Loves Me. Actually, speaking of nobody does it better. It's there is a lot to enjoy in this film. However, I feel that Barbara Bach is our leading Bond lady, who's also spy, Agent XXX. Oh, what a name!
Agent Triple X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't buying the chemistry. Like,
Really?
like thinking back on it, one of the main takeaways that I have is that she's lovely to look at, but I just don't really feel the love anymore.
Huh.
And on top of that, the water, the underwater base, Jaws. Again, I understand there's a love for Jaws, but he's in that vein of just a little too goofy to go ahead and help me through a movie, you know. But it's not a bad movie. It's just if we're ranking them, this is lower.
Okay. Okay, it's interesting. Many people feel that not only is that Roger Moore's best film, that it's one of the best Bonds in the entire franchise. We'll be talking about that here shortly. So that's your 4th worst out of the Bond franchise. Yeah, and it's interesting because these are purely subjective. We're not basing them off anything. We're not saying it's the best or the worst personally, or or a professional opinion. Oh, this is by far a superior film, even if we don't like it or it didn't do as well budget wise. We're just it's kind of like, if you have to eliminate them, you start with the worst and say, well, I'd rather watch all 6 rather than this one. I think that's a heavy dose of what happens with a Bond film. It's a tough call because for me, I have a clear cut number 1, but I'm struggling with 2 or 3. But really, the answer is clear. And for me, my 3rd worst of the Roger Moore James Bond films, as much as I like to pump this up, as much as I'm a mark for this movie, as much as I just say it's pure Roger Entertainment at its finest, and it's one of the most absurd movies of all time in the Bond franchise, if not number 1, that would be Moonraker. I love, 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 love me some Moonraker. This is one of the few Bond movies that I said I wish I could be him in the entire movie, start to finish. It's phenomenal. The ending's a bit long, like all of them, too, but it's not as bad as some of the others. You're starting to see a definitive turn that I'd mentioned a few movies ago about the role of women in James Bond films, from just being sex objects to being equals. And here you've got the Ashton in it. The Venice stuff is A+. It can't get any better than that, even by today's standards. The way it looks, the beautifully shot film. I know it's absurd. I know it's silly, but the whole thing. Every time I see the Rio scene with him in Jaws. And he's like, yeah, his name is Jaws. He kills people, and he just says it in his way. And even though the cable car thing where they're hopping back and forth, when you look at it graphics wise, is a bit dated. I love the concept. I love the way it's shot. I just think it's spectacular. I love how, 1 minute you're here, the transitions from the guy falling into the piano in Venice to even, because of the box where he fell in the clue, to going to Rio and all that. He's slaying so much ass in this. It's just, this is premier Bond. It's phenomenal to me. But the other 2 movies that I'll be talking about on my list are, I think, superior, and I have to mention that. But God damn, I could really make a hard argument for Moonraker's number 1. But in terms of what I think's the best, when we put all this stuff together, in my 3rd spot, it's Moonraker. I know it was low for you, and I know I talk Moonraker up a lot more than everybody else here on the Xtreme Movie Show. But damn it, it's just a really fun watch. It's so lighthearted and goofy that sometimes I just know that if I'm going to go that way with a Bond film, let me get this one, because some Bond films have a bit of a darker tone or a nasty tone, or they're uneven tones, like Man with a Golden Gun. But there's just they knew what they were going to do from the beginning, and God damn it, they did it. I got to give them credit. They went goofy and they went hard on 100% for it. That's great. But visually, quite a stunning film. And honestly, I love the spy stuff to this, as far as you don't really know what's going on until a little bit later, where they're looking to repopulate the earth. I love the idea of the orchid from the Amazon forest. I love the fact that each of the people at the end, when he finally discovers the secret underground layer in the temple, that all the people he met before, like I think the beautiful blonde lady in Venice, where she's like, "Man, just doing something." It's like, well, maybe, but I'd rather look around first. The beautiful blonde, he sees her later. All these gorgeous women he sees at the end, and now he's realizing, yeah, I wanted to sleep with all of them, and he didn't, right? But then they're there at the end, and you're like, oh. But then also too, I think Hugo Drax, I think is just phenomenal. This guy downplayed it so much. It's oh my god, I just think he's a tremendous villain here too. He gave a different spin on it. And I know we've talked about Bond villains not necessarily being scary or imposing, but he had a sense of class and dignity. The whole Oscar Wilde quoting stuff, playing stuff for the beautiful women that you see those later, the Countess and the other one, and of course the stuff with the Dobies eating the raw meat when he snaps his fingers. God damn it, man, this guy's a really really good villain. Love me some Moonraker.
Okay. Are you sure you don't want to put it in your number one? That's a lot of love, man. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. My number 3 is actually A View to a Kill, actually, the one that we just finished. Because I feel like this film, and I'm trying my best not to just be taken away by, oh, it's recency bias. But no, when I'm going ahead, I'm thinking about it just from the opening gambit. We start with a ski scene, and he's collecting something off of a dead agent. Probably wasn't it originally a 003 that died too? But when he does that in this movie, he gets picked up by an agent. Well, it's 5 days to Alaska. But it's just pure more. I love Christopher Walken. I do. He is not the reason that I'm talking about this movie. Moore carries this film. He carries us the whole way through. We have a lacking Bond girl. We are in that. I feel like there's going to be a struggle period now, because we are shifting from 60s, 70s Bond to 80s, 90s Bond, and he's caught right in between. And this is going to be a shaky turn, but Roger Moore carries this film. There is not a single scene that I feel that he is lacking. He goes all out for this movie, and I appreciate that completely. And speaking of side characters, I feel like Mayday here is a better side character than Jaws was, even though she doesn't get her dolly.
We haven't really gone into too much of a detail about that stuff. I do like Mayday a lot, and I think that's just based off the strength of just who she is as a person that comes through. She's not having to act; she just gets to play herself in a channeled sort of way. She is good. Jaws was I don't know I don't know. As a kid, it was cool with the teeth, and there was something there. As an adult watching it, I go, yeah, it's pretty lame, but it's still Jaws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I didn't realize that would be that high up on your list.
I tried to think about as I'm looking at the list. I went ahead, I sat down, took a good long look, and it's just, I realized that this is going to be eventually in the future, when you look back, I want to watch a Bond. This is the best one that we can go for just for Roger Moore, because I feel like you said, he pulls out all the stops.
He's pretty consistent, I think. I mean, I
He
can't argue that.
Even when you have terrible side characters like J.W. Pepper, he's consistent, but it's almost like he gets more time here because it's his goodbye, his swan song.
See, and I don't know if because it's the last film that it is a situation where people are overdoing the love that he would normally be given, like if this was, say, his third film. That's because he's older. It's because they didn't have a replacement. A lot of people thought he was too old for the role. I thought he was fine, and yes, he looks a little aged in some things there too. He's not playing a young Bond by any means. I think he does a great job with it. He's not slower with his speech, his movement, or anything like that, where you can tell there's a physical decline, other than some sunspots on his head in some scenes or whatever. But I mean, big deal, right? You're older. You're gonna be that way. So I've always wondered that, because I tell you, I think the love for Roger Moore always grew with these, and with 7 films behind you, the longest running Bond over the longest period of time, arguably, it's a situation that you go, well, again, maybe he got a little bit more than what the other Bonds would get because of that situation, and each one's unique, so I can't argue that, but that's kind of a tough answer for me, because I think it's kind of a weak film, obviously, where it's at on my list, but I can't disagree with you. I'll simply say that because he was so consistent, Moore was, that to me, all the Mooreisms and stuff in here, he's really kind of coasting to me. And I don't mean it that in a bad way, but it's like he didn't summon an incredible performance that he was lacking in the previous movie or two. Does that make sense?
No, I understand what you mean by that. No, I do. Again, I just feel like maybe in the way that it's written, maybe that's the thing. It seems more with more with more. In comparison to others, I mean that this one just highlights him in a way that I can't recall the others doing as well.
Yeah, I will say that, with Roger Moore in this film, it's definitely an easy, accessible film if you don't know anything about Roger Moore and you see this films, or it's just one that's on. You're like, man, I don't get it. We've got Daniel Craig, and then we got this guy. People will be like, "Oh, there's a big difference." Well, yeah, and it's hard to, over how long the franchise has been, to kind of put it in its proper context. Because I grew up seeing this is the this is not the first Bond I saw in theaters, but I'd seen a couple before it. But I mean, obviously, since gosh, what was the first Bond? For Your Eyes Only or Octopussy, from then on, everything was in a theater. So by that time, again, in the early to mid 80s, franchise already been around 20 years. And you get to see Bond on replays. And it was a big deal because there was nothing really, really kind of like the way they portrayed spy stuff. Bond is that playboy look on it. And I think that even though Connery's got that animal magnetism side to it, and at the time in the 60s, more Cold War type themes, here you have a franchise that knows what's going to do it. We always talk about how there's the opening, that's not the template for it and everything. So it's just a question of how they use it. And I think with Moore, man, he could make these in the sleep. He's just that good. And this movie definitely shows it. I agree with you. He does. If there was any doubt about his age or his ability to do it when this film came out, boy, that shut people up, because he was fine. And yeah, he's not going to do the physical stuff that Connery does, but you don't have to always do that, right? I mean, so there you go. I mean, it's, again, not my favorite of them. It's actually I think it's his worst film. But that being said, we will have our choices too, so I can't argue with that. But what that does do is that leaves us with what we consider our top 2 best Roger Moore films in the franchise. And one movie you'd already mentioned, obviously, that for me at number 2. And again, many would argue that The Spy Who Loved Me is one of the best in the entire franchise, not alone just Moore's best. I wanted to kind of go over to your idea of chemistry with Agent Triple X, because I thought this one was extremely beautiful, very elegant. The chemistry is not, okay, I'm going to have sex with you. It's just a question one, like some of the previous dud of the ways some of the women were written for Bond earlier on. I think she's portrayed as an equal. I think it's there. I think the Egyptian stuff is top notch, incredible stuff. I think Jaws, before he gets to be a goof in Moonraker, you get to see him somewhat serious here. The banter that they have, I think, is good chemistry. And so I don't know if you meant this by chemistry, but like when they're driving and he says like, "Let me drive," and they get in the car, and Jaws is there, and they're at the tomb or at that, and she's like, "Watch this." And then she hits Jaws and she looks up, she goes, shaken, not stirred, and he rolls his eyes. And I'm like, oh my God, who could do that to Bond? She did it, right? I think the opening scene is one of the best. Not because it's skiing, because that's an extra +1 for all the Bond films that have it. But the fact that Agent Triple X, you think is going to be a dude, and no, it's a woman, and they say, "Hey, we're going to put her on equal footing," and I think she carries it off. But Jaws was a different henchman for Bond, which I think was cool. The ski stunt, though, holy crap, it's still one of the best out of all the films. Not even close. I mean, it sticks out in my mind as one of the few opening gambits that just constantly stays with me. Absolutely phenomenal. This is an incredible film. It's back to a little bit more basics with a war story to it. I like how they touched on Bond's actual Navy kind of career a little bit at the beginning with the nuclear subs and all that too. They were a little bit more realistic in it before they jumped a shark with a Moonraker. So it's an incredible film. Diving into the pleasures of the place that you're in there with the ladies handing him the rose while he's seeing an old buddy of his getting stuff. God damn it, what a good movie. Music, this is top tier Bond. It's definitely in the A category here out of all of them too. And my second favorite of all of Roger Moore films here is The Spy Who Loved Me.
And even though you hate the song, I like that.
I don't hate it, but when I think Bond films, I think Juice. Like Thunderball is one of the best to me, not just because it's Tom Jones, but it's the lyrics mean something. I like women singing the Bond songs as well. It's just, when you get to like Writing on the Wall with Sam Smith, I'm like, okay, maybe the guy can sing if you like that style, but it doesn't give you any juice for the movie that's coming up. It's giving you a really somber approach to it, which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. And what's this one here? Nobody Does It Better. Is that right?
Nobody does it better.
Yeah. Okay, that's cute, but it's like a love song here. I want a Bond theme. I want it to hit me in the face, even if a woman's singing it. Man with the Golden Gun, very, very dated. I'm not saying it's a great one, but at the time, it captured what was prevalent there, and it was in your face. And I like how they used the tune to it, like I mentioned in piano. Here, this one is just okay with Roger Moore. We're gonna make it a bit more of a romantic type thing. Nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't really give me a hard on in a spy sense, if you know what I'm saying. It's just there, the theme song. Looks great. It's a phenomenal print. I mean, it just looks the bigger screens that you see these on back rather than regular TV when you're a kid, like I was in the 70s and 80s watching them. My God, it still looks good. And other than say some maybe background things with companies and advertising that I think big movies have gotten better at doing. This is like a movie that you watch, you go, man, it's so beautiful to watch. It's a great film. It really is. What's your next to number one Roger Moore film for you?
You're wondering. I just feel you over there. You're like, because you've already said this movie a while ago, but it's actually Octopussy. I was surprised by Octopussy because when you look at a film with that title, you don't think it's going to be a good movie. But it was the second movie after Moonraker, and it does get a little silly at times, especially with the circus. Moore has to dress up as a clown and all that. But I really did enjoy watching this film, the Fabergé egg.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
then I love the organization that Octopussy, she goes ahead, she's running it, and it's just a team of fighting women. It's like, it's great. This is fun. It's campy, but it's just it's a respectable amount of fun to me. And Bond, he goes ahead, he lays it down a little bit in this one. First with Octopussy's assistant, and then with Octopussy himself. But no, it's good. I really do enjoy this movie, and if people were to ask if I'd recommend it, absolutely, I'd love Octopussy.
Nice, nice. Boy, two of your more favorite ones are two of my worst ones, but if I'm understanding our list correctly, that means we both are in agreement for the number one best movie out of the entire Roger Moore catalog, which means, of course, 2 through 6, no matter how we list them, would all be gone. If we had to pick one Roger Moore film to represent James Bond, then that would, of course, be For Your Eyes Only. And this is how a Bond movie should be. Even the third act, which puts me to sleep all the time in Bond films, they did something different with the rock climbing, and then by the time everything gets done, it's over there. It's a different kind of tension, right? You don't have to have a big shootout. You can
Yeah.
just have a tension being built while doing something. The shots are great. There's almost nothing about For Your Eyes Only that's bad. I think you get to see Roger Moore flex a little bit here, being a bit tougher and stiffer because his buddy gets whacked and he kicks the guy off the ledge in the car. And that's, for James Bond, that's kind of some dark stuff. Even though when he's looking for Feckish in The Spy Who Loved Me, and I got to forget the big henchman's name who's there with him at the end of there, and he chops his tie off and the guy falls to his end. That's kind of dark too, but it hits it here. This is a beautiful looking film. The skiing is by far the best, I think, out of all the skiing stuff in the Bond films. The song's tremendous by Sheena Easton in a bit more of a in your face way that I prefer, even though it's a bit romantic. I love the opening action sequence with him visiting his wife, and then, of course, putting an end to the whole so-called Blofeld stuff, which is what that's supposed to be if you don't know. And the whole helicopter stuff works. The sets and how close you see the helicopter and everything, incredible action stuff. It's tremendous. And of course, I'm forgetting the scenery, how great this is, the music. You can't mention For Your Eyes Only without mentioning Carol Bouquet in here as the Bond girl. I mean, she is tremendous, a complete stunner. She's a couple levels above most of them, up to all the films up to this point, in my opinion. I just think this is tremendous from top to bottom, everything. Even BB Doll adds the right amount of goofiness in it without being offensive, I think, in a female sort of way, even though she's young and innocent. But, all Olympic level athletes at that age are super horny, and, so it's really not far fetched the way she was. She sees an older man, is fickle, like Bond says, and he doesn't really bang her, right? I mean, so they do everything right in this film. This is by far Roger Moore's best Bond film, and I think it's the best Roger Moore Bond film. I have no problem putting up this against any other Bond film from anybody else. For Your Eyes Only. Give it to me.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I can really add to anything that you said, because this movie is just so good. There's no conditions. There's no saying that, oh, well, this is the good campy film. No, this is the good Roger Moore film. This is just the good Bond film. When we get through all of these and we go ahead and we're going to make a list, this is going to be high up there. It's going to be right near On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is my favorite one still. But this movie, you're right, the Bond girl, she's solid in it. She has an emotional stake that you can really just feel like her. Oh, my family just gets shot. I'm struggling to find the words to wrap this up in a way that can hit it as beautifully as you did, but I really do think that For Your Eyes Only is number one for Mr. Moore, for Bond, James Bond.
Yeah, it's tremendous. Yeah, what a friggin' great movie. And they have some of the old elements of Bond in there with some war references and stuff like that. When he's in the ski resort and he's got the little time that was in there, so when it steams up, you see 10 a.m. where he meets and all that. And then they have the little spy phrase catching, but not in St. Moritz. I mean, it's just good ship. You feel like you're there. When they're over in Greece, again, scuba diving, we're going to get that on Bond, right? Looks phenomenal in here. Everything makes sense. Where they're going to get fed to the sharks, even though that's overdone, that's still better than sharks with laser beams and stupid crap we see like in Live and Let Die, right, where people explode. This was really good, where he traps the rope on the coral and everything too, and she's just elegant there, and they have chemistry to me, not in a purely sexual way, but whatever. And it's just it's phenomenal. I know Spy Who Loved Me. I can't argue with anybody who says that's number one, but for me, I think this is the best Roger Moore James Bond film, and I'm surprised you agree, being the young 20-something that you are, and me being the 80s kid that I am. There you have, ladies and gentlemen, our Roger Moore James Bond reviews from worst to first. how we think about them. Let us know what you think there too. We'll continue with the Timothy Dalton movies as we move on forward here on the Xtreme Movie Show. For Professor Pixel, everybody involved here, have a good night. Stay extreme. Good night now.
This was not a Dan Curtis production.